And remember
Hi.
years ago, we used to
Hi.
have
Good to
these
see you.
libraries of Congress from who could do the most books. Yeah. Hey, hi. Yeah, yeah.
And see, and they there's only one left. The main library kids can't get there. I know. And I'm calling you, Bill.
Oh. Oh. Oh, yeah. You can't leave if that's what you thought you were doing. That's not usually an option.
Thanks for coming, Jeff. Bless you. Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry to be a few minutes behind. I'm joined by an august group here today, and I want to thank them for coming out and being with us. I want to thank, first and foremost, some of the elected officials who are here today, beginning with my partner in government day in and day out, Lieutenant Governor Sheila Oliver. Honored to have you with us. Mayor of the great city of Newark, Raz Baraka is in the house. Mayor Baraka. Mayor of the great city of Patterson, Andre Sayag is with us. Andre. And we're in his town. He's hosting us. Honored to have him, and there's a lot going on that we'll talk about, including some tragedy here in Trenton, but great to have you, Mayor Reed Gasiora. So. The Senator Shirley Turner is with us. Senator Turner, honored to have you with us. Thank you for being here. Assemblywoman Verena Reynolds Jackson, thank you very much. Again, we're in your respective backyards as well. So Senator Turner, Verena, and Reed, you are hosting us today. Representing Jersey City, the mayor wanted to be here today. It's an honor to have Chief Mike Kelly with us. Chief, great to have you. Murphy to Kelly, thanking you for being here. And speaking of Murphys and Kellys, we have the chairman of the Brady campaign, Kevin Quinn, is with us. And his colleagues, Kylene Hunter to his right and Joshua Scharf to my far left. And representing the Rutgers gun safety initiatives, Dr. Bernadette Hole is with us. Bernadette, great to have you with us as well. And finally, last but not least, certainly up here at this table is our administration's senior advisor on gun safety, Bill Castor. Am I right, Bill? Thank you. And there are a whole bunch of folks out here. I want to say thank you, from clergy to the red T-shirts. Moms, hello. And other colored T-shirts I can't see terribly well, but in particular I want to thank the Deputy Superintendent of the State Police, Lieutenant Colonel Jeff Nobles, with us. Jeff, thank you for being here. And I mentioned before we even jump into this, and I know we'll hear, a few of us are going to have some remarks, and then we want to throw it open to a broad discussion, but it's been a rough run here in Trenton, and I want to say most importantly, as a matter of sympathy and prayer, our hearts and prayers and thoughts are with the victims, including one deceased from early this morning. And know that we're with you, both Mayor, Assemblywoman, and Senator, and the other elected officials. And secondly, that on behalf of Sheila and myself, we are doing everything we can to bring to bear both state and federal resources to assist you. We've been directly engaged in that. In particular, this began earlier than today, but in particular in the wake of the tragedy overnight. And again, when you chime in for a few words, Reed, would love to get your sense of things. But know that we're with you. This is the capital city. It's one of the great American cities. And as I said to some folks earlier today, this can't go on, and it must not go on. And the state and the federal government are with you as partners. So with that, thank you all for coming out. I've largely introduced everybody. A couple of folks not able to be with us today. The Camden County Metro Police had Scott Thompson wanted to be here today. He's at a national event, I believe. He wanted to be here today and represent Camden, so I thank him in absentia. And Mayor Moran is unable to be with us today as well. So as we previewed a month or so ago at a forum at Rutgers, we are today sort of officially opening new lines of discussion and partnership in our efforts to combat the scourge of gun violence. And it's important to note, as we're seeing play out in Trenton in particular, the summer season is upon us, and the members of law enforcement and community leaders know that this is where we see a spike in the sort of gun violence and activities. I'm very proud of our work to tackle this crisis, at least on the issues within our control. Last year, working with our legislative allies, and I want to, in absentia, give shout-outs to both Senator Loretta Weinberg and Assemblyman Majority Leader, each of them Majority Leaders, Majority Leader Lou Greenwald. We enacted a 6-bill package that reduced magazine limits and created a red flag law to remove guns from the hands of at-risk individuals. We rolled back dangerous regulations issued in the last administration that made it easier to have a concealed carry permit for firearms. We've outlawed ghost guns. We have begun naming and shaming states that are flooding our streets with illegal guns, a topic that we'll discuss here today. We helped establish states for gun safety to fill the void that Washington has left on sharing information on this crisis. And I'm proud to have secured funding for the Gun Violence Research Center, as I mentioned, Bernadette representing at Rutgers. Alongside the Brady campaign, and I want to give its chair, beginning with Kevin and his team, credit, today we look to bring their years of research and work into our cities so local officials can partner and share data in the efforts to curb gun violence. This new effort will buttress the efforts of the Attorney General, Gurbir Grewal, State Police Colonel and Superintendent Pat Callahan, who work closely with our other state and federal partners to go after crime guns. The Attorney General and the State Police have had several significant successes in combating gun trafficking. Our local police have also been key in this effort. Through the NJ Gun Stat Reporting Initiative, we now know that in just the first 3 months of this year, I think we only have through March available, I believe, more than 80% of the crime guns used in New Jersey came from out of state. The overwhelming majority flowed into New Jersey along the I-95, or so-called iron pipeline, from states with weaker gun laws and regulations. Our goal is to ensure that this is a summer of safety in our communities. That begins with community-based nonviolence initiatives and with getting to the root causes of this epidemic so we can get crime guns off of our streets. I'm very much looking forward to our discussion today and to helping with this great team curb the scourge of gun violence. A couple of other comments before I turn things over to the to the Lieutenant Governor. In many respects, it's no surprise that we've got 4 communities represented here. It's no surprise that this, in many respects, is a city-driven initiative. I think that's important. The Brady campaign has done their research and work in places as far-flung as Oakland, Los Angeles, Milwaukee, and the intention is to bring that research and that focus into communities, particularly the 4 represented here today, plus Camden. And I think you've found, Kevin, over the course of your work, that 5% of the dealers are responsible for about 90% of the crime guns. And so whether it's through legal action or best practices or training programs, getting that number to come down and shift meaningfully is a big, important step that we're talking about here. We're sort of, if you're following our narrative, we've gone from naming and shaming states that contribute illegal guns. We've now begun to name and shame manufacturers, and now this is going to be a focus on dealers. And again, that's not a coincidence. That's sort of the arc of the narrative here that we're speaking to today. And again, importantly, it's a relationship between Brady, who's got experience on this, with the able assists of Rutgers with cities. It's a city-driven program. So with that, again, I thank everyone for being here today. Would love to turn things over and ask the Lieutenant Governor to say a few words on her behalf.
Thank
Great to have
you.
with
Thank you, Governor Murphy. I simply want to say that we have gained through the decades enough analytical data, as the governor described, to address collaborative initiatives to reduce gun violence. I think that the mayors that are represented here, they know what the issues are in their communities. Being commissioner of the Department of Community Affairs, I have the opportunity to look at 565 municipalities. But I think we need to understand that while we must focus on what is happening in our cities, it is begin to broaden and blossom. And if we talk to law enforcement officials in suburban communities as well, they are dealing with the issue of gun violence in their towns. So I think that law enforcement is more articulate in this than I am, but one thing I have learned from law enforcement agencies is that it's getting down to younger and younger children. In the city of Trenton, there are young people who are 12 and 13 years old who are getting engaged in utilizing guns. So we know there are solutions. The research is showing us that there are solutions, and I think instead of, just being sorrowful and griefful when there is a death of someone by gun violence, we have to begin to protect families in New Jersey by doing something very strong and affirmative about it.
Well said, and thank you, Sheila. I'd love to next just hear from each of the three august mayors here with us today, beginning with Mayor Gusiora from Trenton. Thank you for hosting us today, Reed.
And thank you for gathering us today, Governor, because this is such a critical day in the city of Trenton. Last night we had 6 shootings, and one resulted in a fatality. Friday night we had 10 shootings. And under the definition of mass shootings, we've had 2 this year, and even one shooting is far too many. And Trenton can't continue to be a tale of 2 cities where you have people trying to have economic development, improvements to education, and then you have neighborhoods that are racked with gun violence. We have neighborhood gangs that the kids who join the gangs, they just have no alternative, no hope. We try to bring in economic development so they will have a future, but then people are reluctant to do business with the city of Trenton after these incidents happen. So we have a lot of work to cut out. We need the resources as a capital city, and we need to modernize the technology the police use, but we need more boots on the ground to combat the scourge of gun violence.
Well said. We'll come back to Trenton in a minute. Mayor Baraka, great to have you with us. Thank you for being here today. We'd love to get any comments you've got.
Well, I'm glad to be here. I want to thank you, Governor, for convening this roundtable today around gun violence. Is incredibly important. It's incredibly important for us to discuss this issue. We are a little jaded, if you will, little anxious about some of the things that are going on. The Brady bill was designed because the President of the United States was an attempted assassination on his life. The authority of the President of the United States, an attempt to kill him, has got us to where we are today, but we have not been able to get past that, at least federally. And there have been mass shootings across the nation, in schools, in churches, in masjids, and we still have not been able to get the kind of federal support that we need. So I know the kids that Mayor Gusiori is talking about and the kids that I deal with every day, there's not really any attention on them. If we can't even pay attention to kids getting shot in the elementary school, who's going to care about kids getting killed on Avon Avenue in the city of Newark? It's important for us, important for the state of New Jersey. That's why I applaud your efforts to at least cover down in these areas where people aren't talking about. We have mass shootings like this annually, not every 5 or 10, 15 years. We have them annually. You're talking statistics that are, deplorable and at epidemic proportions. In anybody else's community or neighborhood, if 15 or 20 kids get killed in a year, that would be considered an epidemic. If you have in these neighborhoods over 100 kids, 200 kids getting murdered a year, that's an epidemic, and it should be looked at as a serious health crisis, and something should be done about what's happening to the flow of guns in our communities. So I applaud what you're doing here today, and prayerfully in the state of New Jersey, we continue down this lane of making sure that we deny people access to these illegal guns that are showing up in our community, and we do many programs that are empowering community-based organizations to get out here and prevent this kind of violence from taking place. So thank you for having me.
Mayor, thank you for being here. Thank you for your words. Thank you for your leadership. I assume it's too early to know the nature of the weapons used last night, or this morning, I should say, but if it holds 80% chance they were illegally trafficked into the state. And that's not the only thing we could do, but that sure as heck is one big step we could take. Mayor Andre Sy again from Patterson. Great to have you, Andre.
Thank you, Governor. A major part of the problem in Patterson is access. It's far too easy to purchase a gun in our city. It could be done outside of a school, it could be done outside of a store. We've seen it play out far too often in our city. So if we cut that access off, because as I've told Bill in the past, these guns don't grow legs and just appear in Patterson. They got here somehow, and they're getting in the wrong hands, through the wrong hands. We saw a decline in violent crime last year, and I'm hoping that it's not an aberration. There was a 50% reduction in homicides in the city. Thus far, 5 months in, almost 6 months in, we are seeing an uptick, Mayor Baraka, in shootings. So we're trending in the wrong direction right now. We're doing everything we can as far as resources is concerned. With recidivism, we're really emphasizing reentry programs. Today, we just brought in a new manufacturer. We got another manufacturer on deck. We're working with the EDA. We're going to make the most of these ERG tax credits because clearly we're seeing both sides of the spectrum as far as the public safety piece and then the economic development aspect of it as well. But Reed, I just want to let you know we're in this together, all of us.
Amen.
Roz, Reed, and Governor, thank you for your leadership on this issue, and everyone else here. Let's make sure we get solutions this summer.
Andre, real quick, any sense as to the contributing factors to the uptick this year?
It could be the lack of opportunities. It could be people being released out in the streets. There's a whole host of factors that could be contributing.
Yes. Thank you again for being here.
Thank you.
Chief Mike Kelly, a perspective from Jersey City, and thank you again for being with us today.
So, thank you, Governor. Just a couple things that I've been the chief of police for a year and a half, and Mayor Stephen Fulop, when he gave me this job, gun violence was his #1 priority. And the cops in Jersey City have done a great job in knocking down the gun violence. The problem is, for us, we've put so many resources into our anti-gun violence program, we are now seeing the seams bust out in other programs that are very, very important, like community policing. We have so many police officers dedicated to reducing our gun violence last year by 30%. This year, thank God, we're down about 60% because we have so many assets that the mayor has provided us to bring those numbers down. But as I speak with our partners with the ATF, it's not everything that's being done is helping. Let me just say that the governor's office, everything that is being done is contributing to the downward trend statewide. The problem is the proliferation of handguns is so great right now. Most of the guns that we see that are perpetrating the violence are not a year old, are not 2 years old. They're 5 years old. They're 10 years old. They're 12 years old. We have no idea where they started from. No idea. So although we can name states and we can name manufacturers, the problem is they're there. And I don't know how to get rid of them. But I will tell you that I know these mayors have dumped a lot of resources into the problem, and that's why they've seen pockets of success, because of the good work of the cops. But at the end of the day, the proliferation of the guns is a big, big problem. And again, we are delaying our community policing program again because we've dedicated so many police officers to saving people's lives.
Bless you, and thank you for that. I mentioned red T-shirts. I have to acknowledge I'm seeing purple T-shirts out there as well. I want to make sure you know that I saw you. It's hard for me to see through the Klieg lights here. We also got Bishop Rodriguez, I didn't acknowledge earlier, in from Jersey City, City Line, and sitting beside the one and only Terry Tucker. So thank you also, all of you, for being here. Before we go to the Brady and Rutgers folks, I'd love to ask Senator Turner or Assemblywoman Reynolds Jackson if you'd like to add any comments, particularly from your Trenton representation perspective. Great to have you, Senator.
Thank you, Governor, for bringing us together today. But we should have come together a long, long time ago, because this problem just didn't start. It has been going on in the city of Trenton for more than 20 years, and we haven't seen enough in the way of tangible results of all of the things that we claim that we've done. No child is ever born saying, I want to be a gangbanger when I grow up. But we have in our urban areas, and particularly right here in the city of Trenton, so much poverty and so little hope and so few resources to provide to the children in this city. We have inadequate education, and that's number one. So many of the children here are not reading on grade level when they reach third grade. And we all know that in most cases, if a child is not reading on grade level by third grade, that child is going to continue to lag behind in school. And they're just more or less not just marking time, waiting to drop out, but also they're disruptive. And they're the ones who usually get into trouble. And we see what we call now the school to prison pipeline. And in these communities, we see these are the children whose parents, in most cases, have never graduated from high school. In many cases, they're single heads of households. And many of those mothers are working 2 or 3 jobs just to make ends meet. And the kind of support and supervision is not available in those homes. And many times these kids don't have programs after school to supervise them until the parents get home. So they're left on their own devices. And many times it's getting in with the wrong gang. So those are some of the things we need to address. The education and the lack thereof, as well as employment, because many of the mothers and fathers of these children don't have jobs because they too are undereducated and lack skills and lack hope. So that's one aspect. But we also need, as was mentioned before, to do a better job of keeping guns out of these communities. I thought after the Congress people got shot, one, I guess they were playing baseball, and then there was one congresswoman was having a town hall meeting and was shot. I said, oh, finally it's happening in their venue. Perhaps we'll see some action. But nothing still has occurred in terms of trying to keep guns from flowing like water in these communities. And here in the city of Trenton, because of lack of resources, we had to close 4 libraries. We had a library in each ward, 4 wards, and now we have 1 main library. So it's easier for a kid to pick up a gun than to pick up a book. So these are the kinds of things that we're facing. But we know we cannot arrest our way out of it, and we cannot just pray our way out of it. We've got to take some affirmative action to turn this around, and we have to start with getting the bad actors off the streets. And I'm no member of law enforcement, but from what I have been told and what I've seen, it's generally the same perpetrators involved in this gun violence activity. So back in 2013, I introduced a bill which would enhance the penalties of those people who are found with weapons that are unlicensed and they're using it for criminal purposes, to spend more time in jail. Because what I've found many times is the revolving door. They are arrested, they pay their fines, and they're right back on the street to commit other crimes. So at least if we can keep them behind bars long enough, the streets will be safer a little longer until we can control the illegal flow of guns.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Thank you, Senator. You mentioned it's easier to get a gun than a library book. I also want to remind everybody in our budget, I made the point, our proposed budget, that it's cheaper to get a dog permit, it's cheaper to get a handgun permit than it is to get a permit to get a dog. And you mentioned that same group of bad apples, and I think Kevin thinks I got it right. 5% of dealers are responsible in your research for 90% of the crime guns. Assemblywoman Verlina Reynolds-Jackson, please.
I just want to thank you, Governor, for inviting me to this roundtable. Before I said yes, I wanted to think about why I was coming, and I wanted to hear what hope I would be able to take back to my community. We know what the problems are, and locking everyone up isn't it. And so I'm here to hear about the strategic plans that we're going to be able to implement when we go back to our prospective town. So I'm going to keep it short, and I'm ready to hear what we have to say.
It is great having you, and I appreciate your being here and Trenton being so well represented on a tragic day. Kevin Quinn, would love to turn to you and your Brady colleagues for a few words in particular, and then we'll go to Bernadette to get the Rutgers perspective and then close it out with Bill. But would love to have you, Kai, Josh, as you see fit. I mentioned your work with Milwaukee, Los Angeles, Oakland, to pick 3 communities. What can we expect, among other comments, what can we expect from the research and relationship that Brady can establish with these communities?
Sure. Thank you, Governor. Just a couple of things before I turn things over to Kai Hunter, who runs our crime guns program at Brady. One, I want to thank and acknowledge all the activists that are here today. You are all very familiar faces to me. Some of us know one another's name, some of us don't. But we've gotten to know each other over the last 2.5 years, and so thank you for continuing to be present at these meetings. It means so much to me, and I know the people up here. Secondly, I can't add a lot of color to the stories you just heard from our elected officials about the impact that gun violence has on their communities. The stakes and the folks have a long shot of making it out of many of these communities. Let's get the guns out of the communities and give people a real chance, And then let me turn it over to Kai. She can share our programmatic efforts. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Hello, Kai.
Hi, Governor, thank you, and thank you to everyone who is here, and particularly the members of the community who have taken the time out of their days to show up and actually dig in. Gun violence, as has been mentioned many times, is an epidemic. It's a public health crisis. We're losing 100 Americans every day. And it's more than that, it's a violation of basic fundamental human rights that we have. And when we've heard the stories today throughout some of the cities of New Jersey, we're reminded that at Brady we fundamentally believe that where you live should not determine if you live. And to solve this problem, we need to move beyond thoughts and prayers. We need to move beyond high-level conversations. We need to move beyond feeling very strongly about this and actually doing something. The governor mentioned that we have combating crime gun initiatives in a variety of other cities. What is unique about this approach is that we take a locally tailored, data-driven approach, working with elected officials in communities, law enforcement in communities, the community programs that are doing great violence interdiction work within these communities, and activists in these communities, including faith leaders, educators, other musicians, often is the case, to take a supply-side approach. Because, as has been said time and time again, it's easier to get guns than books. It's easier to get guns than fresh food in a lot of these areas. And you've heard the stat mentioned several times that about 5% of the dealers are responsible for 90% of the guns. So dealers play a role. But it's more than that. It's actually looking at the unique supply chains that make it easy for guns to get into these communities. Because for almost every single one of these guns that is recovered in a crime, there is a point where it leaves the legal market, where it was legally purchased, legally sold at some point, and enters the illegal market. And so taking a supply-side approach is working with partners like the ones at Rutgers that you'll hear about, to look at the unique circumstances, the unique supply chains, the demographics, the urban environments, the lack of opportunities that are unique to these areas that create those supply chains, and look at the points along the chains where we can actively intervene, where we can work as a community to actively intervene. We're fortunate to be doing this work in New Jersey, where communities are given a lot of autonomy to address gun violence. And that's something that's very, very fortunate, unlike some of the areas that we work, that New Jersey is a place where we can actually dig in to these community-based solutions and work with community leaders of all sorts to come up with the unique, localized opportunities to stop the flow of crime guns into those communities. We're excited to launch this effort and look forward to digging in with each and every one of you.
Thank you, Kai. And it's a day after Memorial Day, but I say this to you as a decorated veteran of the United States Marine Corps. Happy Memorial Day, belatedly, and thank you for your service. Josh, anything you want to add, or are you good?
I'm okay.
You sure? Okay. Bernadette Hole is here from the Rutgers Gun Violence Research Center. As I mentioned a month or so ago, we previewed this community partnership notion. Bernadette, anything you'd like to add?
Just that the center really does take an approach, as you had referred to before, the public health approach in treating gun violence as an issue that needs to be addressed more holistically. And this idea of bringing the cities together and creating safer communities is in fact greatly aligned with the mission of the center to do science that will produce actionable programs and policies to reduce gun violence and create safer communities.
Great.
So thank you.
And thank you for the research that's going on under your watchful eye at Rutgers. It is making an enormous difference, in particular in areas that we're not necessarily here to talk about today, but in the safer gun space, which is a huge potential game changer. So thank you for that. Would love to close out before we throw it open to some questions with our senior advisor on firearms and gun safety, Bill Kastner. Bill?
Thank you, Governor, and we're extraordinarily appreciative of your work on gun violence prevention, unlike Washington, which seems complacent with the carnage that occurs on a daily basis in this country. The governor's challenge to all of us has been to identify aggressive and innovative approaches to address this crisis, and I believe this potential partnership with Brady falls squarely under that category. I've been impressed with the results that Brady has had working and addressing the issue of crime guns through bad apple dealers. Sometimes it's through threat of litigation, sometimes it's through public shaming, but getting some of these dealers to adopt best practices and a code of conduct, as Governor Murphy mentioned, to do background checks, something as simple as background checks of its employees, training gun dealers to identify straw purchasers, having dealers purchase insurance against the theft of firearms, sometimes restricting the sale of certain types of firearms, sometimes restricting the sale of firearms to those under age 21. These are all really important potential takeaways of trying to identify who the bad apple dealers are, who are the ones that are ultimately selling the guns that are ending up in New Jersey communities, and taking aggressive actions to enforce that. And to that end, with the governor's permission, our recommendation, working with each mayor and with Rutgers University, is to try to establish a point of contact by the end of this week, and to convene our first specific discussion on this collaboration the following week, with the goal of getting these agreements in place this summer. And that would be our specific recommended timetable, Governor.
Fantastic. Before we throw it open, did anyone have anything else?
I have
Food and
one
Welfare?
last,
Lieutenant
yes.
Governor Sheila Oliver.
Yes, and I think as this discussion moves forward and as we begin to do this work going forward, as we always have, we cannot avoid the issue of the lack of mental health resources in our communities. And often, as particularly when we talk about younger people with guns in the street, many of those young people have many undiagnosed mental health issues. If you visit our penal institutions around the state, you will find that significant numbers of people who are incarcerated really are suffering from mental health challenges. And I think that a part of the solving of gun violence in communities, particularly the cities that are represented here, they really need resources to address mental health within their communities.
Well said. Please, Mayor.
Yes. I just wanted to, just some of the data that my public safety director, he makes sure that I have a few things. At the end of the day, 60% of the people who commit violence with guns in our community are people who have a warrant at the time. So they are actually looking for these people presently, and it's the average is they've committed 5 additional crimes before they even got to this one. And those guns are the same guns that was talked about that are spread from event to event to event. What I do want to push back against is that we can't do anything because we can't do community policing or community work because of the violence in our community. It's my contention, and so is the public safety director, that the community policing has helped us reduce the crime and violence in our community. So we have less crime, but we also have made less arrests. Right. So it goes against the national trend that you're going to arrest more people. Yep. You need the National Guard. You need all these things to reduce crime. We've actually arrested less people, have less shootings or less violence. And so it's important for us, and we've initiated a lot of community work. And so we're trying to get resources to do more of that community work. We contend that because of that work and the relationship that the police have with the community, that it in fact helped us to reduce crime in our neighborhoods.
Well said. So before we throw it open to a few questions, just the frame that as we think about the whole gun safety arena, some of the steps we take are through executive action, some are through legislation. Some steps are taken uniquely at the state level with the state police and the attorney general. Some actions we need federal partners. So the discussions today, for instance, on the Trenton tragedy, has been both state, federal, and local, and I'm sure as well at the county level. Other steps, and today is an example of this form, are best taken based on research at a community level. So the state is here always and vigilantly here as a partner. But if you look at the successes, particularly the work that Brady's done, and I've probably overemphasized the dealer community. It's one of, as you said, Kai, one of several. It's sort of a holistic Moneyball approach, I would say, is how I would describe the way you engage with communities. And we believe, and the reason we're here today, that community level, in the 5 communities we've talked about, 4 of them represented here, I think, make up about 50% of the gun crimes that we deal with in the state. So it's not a coincidence that we're dealing with these communities. So I thank each and every one of you on behalf of the Lieutenant Governor for being with us today. We'll take a few questions in the back. Michael. It was coincidentally scheduled. It was not convened on that basis, and I thought the same, knowing that I had my memo from the end of the week to prepare for today. It occurred to me that given the tragedy overnight this morning and then Friday night, it may have appeared that way, but no, this was something that was on the books. Charlie. Yeah, and Charlie, the important point on naming and shaming, the one that's been up there and has the longest legs are the states that have exported guns illegally. We're now doing the same thing for manufacturers. I would just say the manufacturer time frame that's been up and running is much shorter. Bill, do you want to address that?
Yes, Governor. As the governor mentioned, this is a multi-pronged approach. So, as Justice Brandeis said, sunlight's the best disinfectant. So to the degree that these top exporters of crime guns had not been previously identified, that was a good first step. To then take it to the manufacturer level, as the governor said, was an important second step. And now to find out who are these actual retailers that are selling these crime guns that are disproportionately ending up in cities is really important. It's in order to tackle the issue, we need the information first and foremost. We didn't have that information previously, so we're trying to look at this in a comprehensive way.
Yeah, and I think, Josh, if you can talk, some of our legal cases at Brady, which have exposed bad practices by dealers, have actually forced either dealers to shut down or publicly reform their practices, if you want to speak to those.
Josh, you would find a way to get you on here.
Of course, that's true. And I'd like to make the point that the overwhelming majority of gun dealers are law-abiding business people who adopt responsible practices. There is a small minority of gun dealers that supply the overwhelming majority of the guns that are traced to crime. Brady's legal efforts over the years, representing victims of gun violence against those in the industry that have engaged in negligent and illegal practices, has been very successful in reforming some of the worst gun dealers, whether through them shutting down or adopting safer business practices that help avoid sales to people such as straw purchasers or traffickers that are at the root of crime guns that flood into the cities across the country and into New Jersey as well.
We don't bat 1,000, I have to say, in the interest that I won't say the state, but one of the export states into New Jersey was a state that we wanted to include in the States for Gun Safety, our little coalition, which exists because Washington can't seem to find a way toward national legislation, and they declined to participate, and it was because of politics, not because they didn't think we were right on the facts. And so the silver lining to that rejection is that we're a pretty special state right now as it relates to the progress we're making on gun safety. Please. I assumed you did. Yeah, I mean, it's a question that I've not gotten, and I'm the incoming chair, but not yet the chair. And I think the DGA, like a lot of institutions, makes an institutional selection as opposed to a particular personal preference. But folks have no question where I am on this issue. I accept that there are different dynamics in different states, but we're quite vocal, not just on guns. I should just say across the board, we tell the New Jersey story loud and clear at any gathering of the DGA, whether it's among governors or in the broader community. We'll continue to do that. Go behind you here, Daniel. Daniel, that's you, buddy. I'm looking at you. There's no one behind you, Daniel. Yeah, I'm not, I don't want to disappoint you, but it won't be the first time that I've said we don't comment on legislation that's being baked, so to speak, in this case. I'm proud of the fact, just make sure you're all paying attention. I'm proud of the fact that that after 8 years of the medical marijuana regime being gummed up needlessly, that within our first number of days, we've opened it up, and I think we're gaining 3,000 patients a month at this rate, but we need to open it up further. I've got to stand on the side of the residents of the state where it's either a literally life-saving or at a minimum life-altering reality for them, and they're being the supply-demand curve is being artificially held back and the access to the system denied, which we cannot any longer allow to happen. So we've been on the side of patience and opening this regime up, and will continue to be. Sorry, ma'am. I apologize.
We spoke with a lot of parents out there today, a lot of mothers, single mothers, who were just begging, and Senator, you pointed out that it's been going on a long time, it just started, so it's been going on for quite a while. But they were actually begging for some kind of help, any kind of help. Is there any hope, any words you can say today that might help some of these mothers who are prisoners in their homes with their children in that neighborhood?
Are these moms in Trenton?
These are moms in Trenton in
Yep.
the very neighborhood.
So I'll give you a couple of words, and maybe the mayor or the representatives may want to add their words. We are committed to undoing not just the tragedy that we saw overnight and over the weekend, but to working with Trenton on the litany of the history and the challenges that Senator Turner outlined, whether it's education or job opportunities. As we have discussed, the mayor and I, in fact, the senator and the assemblywoman, this community, other communities in this state have big brothers or folks who adopt the community, whether it's a corporation or individuals. In Trenton, it's got to be the governor and the administration, and more broadly, the government. And we're committed to that. As it relates to the specifics of last night, the state police, the state, federal authorities are activated and aggressively deploying and pursuing whatever avenues they're pursuing at the moment in the specific of last night.
Yes, but I've talked to those same mothers, and they often cite that when they were growing up, they had Weed and Seed and other programs that kept them busy. With dwindling resources, there are less and less recreation outlets, and we have to work harder to provide them. As the senator said, we had 4 branch libraries that closed. We used to have an $8 million budget for libraries. Now we're down to 2. So we need to provide more outlets, more hope for the kids so that they would join a library rather than join a gang.
They're trapped. But one of the things that I wanted to share with the mothers that you spoke to, as to what we're going to be doing to improve the situation in the city of Trenton. And I spoke to the mayor about it, and he's in agreement that we need to light up these streets with LED lights. And we all know that if the streets are well lit, it's going to help to be a deterrent to crime and also make people feel safer coming out of their homes. And also, we talked about cameras at these hotspot intersections, where we can have greater footage of people who are perpetrating these crimes so we can get them off the streets.
Amen.
And the mayor indicated that we're going to be working on that expeditiously, and we're not going to wait any longer because summer's already here for all intents and purposes, and we don't want a long, hot summer.
Amen. Well, I'm going to suggest that with that, we draw this to a close. I want to thank the elected officials with us today, Mayor Sayegh, Mayor Baraka, Mayor Gusiora, Senator Turner, Assemblywoman Reynolds Jackson. I want to thank Chief Kelly for being here. The Brady team, Kevin and Ty and Josh. Bernadette, thank you for representing Rutgers so well. Bill, thank you for everything you do. And last but not least, to my partner in government, Lieutenant Governor Sheila Oliver. I think you're going to see this is going to be a regular drumbeat. You know, there's no one magic bullet. There's no, I'll jump on what Senator Turner said. It can't just be this or that. It's going to have to be a whole symphony of actions that we take in these communities. And I'm incredibly excited by the opportunity for the partnership between the Brady campaign with Rutgers Able Assistance in these communities for really making a change. Thank you all.